Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast, where we explore the paradox of healing.
And we broadcast all of the healing codes to support a world of more heart-centered humans.
How's it going?
It's good over here.
Right.
I've met Meg because I've had a session with Meg before, but I guess the two of you haven't met. So, Lauren, I'll introduce you to Meg.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm definitely a Instagram follower and stay close to your work. So I'm really grateful to be with you today.
I'm grateful to be here too. Thanks for saying that. I receive. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what this time holds.
All right.
Well, I go by Divine Feminine Priestess, who specializes in twin flame work. I've also been called an interdimensional oracle. I really don't like the word coach because it's not what it's a very small part of what I do, is coaching people. We do more of the mystical, less logical aspect of things. And just Meg or Meg Arcadia, because that's what most people know me by. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And Bethany, how do you want to be known today?
Today? Well, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, like, I don't know, I have all these questions. So I feel like I have a little bit of like a beginner mind, like curious part of me here today. Like I noticed and really paid attention to a lot of Meg's stuff, like on TikTok and other places. And especially like around one relationship that I have in my life. And I had a session with Meg and got some insight, and it was really fun. It felt like one of those things of like, oh yeah, whatever model Meg's using, like however she thinks about things, I think it's similar to what Lauryn and I do. We also do coaching and, call it coaching, call it whatever you want to call it. But like, felt like similar assumptions, similar beliefs, things like that. And I noticed feeling so different and my attention's on such a different place. So I'm kind of curious to see how I show up around twin flame, divine feminine stuff from being in a little bit of a different place myself than the last time I talked to Meg. So I'm just kind of curious about the different flavor that's here for me.
And I know you have had a session, but is there anything you want Meg to know about you and who you are, like to know you more deeply?
No, not up front. I was pretty like just transparent and open in the session that we had. I remember saying a lot. But like a lot of the stuff I talked about, I'll say this, Lauryn is like, she's my bestie. We talk about this stuff all the time. We have like, our astrology is like a day and a half different. So we have like, we're doing real similar stuff, but maybe like not at the exact same time. So we both have a lot of thoughts around like divine feminine, twin flame journey stuff. And a lot of the things you write, I think has resonated for both of us, have like relationships in our life that we think about that way. And it's a big part of how we relate to each other and what we talk about. So you can just know that this is stuff we think about and talk about, I guess. And a lot of your words, I think, have resonated. At some point I started sharing TikToks and I was like, and she's like, yeah, I feel really seen and known by this. So you can know that.
Beautiful. And, I'm a seer, so words are primitive. We're all here,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just feeling into like, I guess to be known today. I guess when I went into this, like, I think I'm going to be tender in this space today because the relationship where that brings me to your work and the ways that I relate to what you share, Meg, is, it's a tender space right now. And so I just noticed being tender arriving and kind of tender in the space right now. And yeah, I think we all kind of do little similar work in the world, overlapping in different ways. And so, yeah.
Okay, cool. How do you want to start, Lauren?
Well, we usually kind of just start with like kind of this like mapping, like what brought you to this work and your own healing journey that, that brought you to where you are now. How would you answer that?
It's a long and winding road. I started this journey started, many lifetimes ago, in a far, far away land. But in this life, I experienced a birth trauma. About 12 hours after I was born, I died, and I encountered the divine and had this experience where life and death touched me in the same moment. And when I was very small, when I was about 1.5, I started speaking. I was very articulate, and I would tell anyone who listened about this encounter. And from that point on, as long as I've been speaking not necessarily prophetically. Sometimes it's been prophetically, especially when I was younger and like not actually working with it consciously, just allowing things to flow. But speaking to people in a way that freaked them out a little bit, seeing people and noticing things and just like labeling what I was seeing, and people going like, what? No one knows that. What? Why are you saying that? Or saying, like, highlighting truths. That's what a lot of my life has been focused around, is me organically seeing something and just mentioning it in the same way. I'd be like, oh, the trees are changing color and the sky is a little cloudy today, and also that's a mommy issue or whatever. And saying these things, not realizing, not recognizing that not everyone was in a conscious state of awareness around what I was aware of organically. And B, that you can't just say that to people. There's a time and a place. So I was raised Irish Catholic, and I'm the youngest of 3. And I was raised as the wounded feminine, as anyone on the twin flame journey is. And what that meant is that I didn't feel comfortable. I was taught that organic person, who I am, and who I am able to, embody now, that soul essence, was wrong. And was something to be controlled by other people, or something to only be used in service of other people to my own detriment, me laying myself down or putting myself on the cross, as we would say. That led to a lot of anxiety and depression from a very young age. And disordered eating and body dysmorphia from a very young age, where I didn't recognize myself and was trying to find that false sense of control through attempting to manipulate what my body showed up as. But because of that in and of itself not being how bodies work, and B, because I was channeling so much energy, both from the divine and from guides and from the ether, the astral, and from people around me, but didn't have any instruction or any awareness when it came to allowing it to flow. I held everything in, just because that's what I was trained to do. That's what kind of the culture I was raised in produced. So there were a lot of dark years when I was a child and when I was a teenager. And I have always been very creative. I've always been a prolific writer. I've always been very comfortable in front of people. And I was always really talented on stage in a number of different ways. So I went to New York for college. I went to NYU, to the art school there. The film school was technically where I was, and I studied dramatic writing for film and television, and I was performing comedy and music at pretty high level with people you've heard of, like with people that everyone knows. And I was, living what I thought my dream was, because my whole life I had fixated on comedy television because it made me feel better for moments at a time. And then I needed to know how it worked. And it was just another system of energy where I could start to understand why I'm relating to this in this way, and why other people are relating to this in this way, and where that came from out of the people creating it. And I was a total nerd about it. My dad has said from the time I was like 14, I'm no fun to watch TV with, because I dissect it. Or tell them what they could have done better, or tell them what they originally did.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I was, my dream had been to work at Saturday Night Live from the time I was like 4 years old. And when I was 21, I got an internship there. And there were some people who had just started working on that show in the cast and in the writer's room who I had been performing and writing with throughout college. And so I kind of had this interesting middle space. Like I wasn't working for the show in the capacity that wasn't an internship, but I also got like a little bit more than I think the average intern does in that space. And I had the opportunity to explore jobs there. And I ultimately turned them down because I saw I'd be really good at this. I am really good at this. I could do this, but I'll die because I was drinking all the time and I was doing every substance under the sun and I couldn't sit still. And it's because I had been in New York for, 4 years at that point, and I'm an open channel, and being in that population dense of a place, just like it was crazy for my nervous system. So my whole life was like a science experiment of trying to like numb and energize and numb and energize and numb and energize, but never looking at the truth. Never looking at why I had come here in the first place. Why did I create a life and a dream and a career out of a coping mechanism? And why couldn't I call a coping mechanism a coping mechanism? So I experienced a few major losses, people close to me who died. My cousin was one. We were really close. He died when I was 19. He was 21. And a few months later, a guy that I had grown up with, that I graduated high school with like 50 other people, because our school was super small. He died as well, both of these really tragically. And I was just avoiding so much grief. And it wasn't that I didn't have awareness of everything from my childhood that felt traumatic and these moments of experiencing death that felt traumatic. I did have an awareness, but I couldn't explore it further. I was too close to it still. And I had a really great therapist in college, or right after college, who taught me why it was so hard for me to explore my pain. And she had me put my hand on my heart, because I had brought up my birth trauma for the first time since I was a child. And I didn't even really know why. And I was like, I don't even really know why I'm telling you this, but like this happened and I don't talk about it anymore. And she had me put my hand on my heart and close my eyes and feel my heart beating. And she said, do you feel it? I said, yes. She said, that's the heart that stopped. So what was happening was my body physically, on a muscular somatic level, every time I felt anything that felt like death, or even the suggestion of death, I felt myself die again. So of course I was depressed. Of course my cortisol and all my hormones were fucked. Can I curse? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, of course I had no way of grounding myself in this reality when I was being pulled into the underworld all the time. So I moved away from entertainment, wanted to work in some arts ed nonprofits. So I did that. I had a relationship that was really intense and really toxic, and I was his mommy issue and he was my daddy issue, just embodied. And of course it was like a tumultuous, crazy breakup. And after that, kind of hit a rock bottom. And I started moving through the world a little bit differently. And I didn't really know I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea where I was being led, but it's when I really started to heal my relationship with the divine, because I had recognized and realized that I never didn't believe in the divine or believe in God or believe in love. I was pissed. And so I had been like raging against the divine. I recognized that in reflection of this relationship, because he didn't believe in God or the divine or anything, like at all. And that's wild to me, that I, who like literally have mushroom brain at this point, not because I'm on mushrooms all the time, not because I've even really done them that many times, but I just see how everything's connected inherently. And that's always been the case. And that's always been where my magic has come from, and why people have, no matter what state I've been in, have been like, hey, like I see you, and you're a special flower, and let's talk. And kind of how I was able to have so many opportunities and take advantage of so many opportunities, that was still intact, right? Like that divine identity and that connection was always there. So I worked as a dog walker for a period of time at a very intense dog walking boutique. And that just totally shifted the hormones in my body, because I was on a bike and walking all day, and I had back-to-back walks scheduled. And so I'd have to like whip around Brooklyn and Greenpoint and Williamsburg and Bushwick and Bed-Stuy and be on it. And it just totally changed the way I related to my body. Because when you are that physical, you have to eat all the time. You just have to. So I was eating constantly, and it really did alter the way that I thought about my body, and the way I thought about food, and the way I thought about exercise. And that is how I really began to embody my intuitive self, because the body is God. The body holds the only reason why we know that we're feeling something is because chemicals are firing in our body and we're perceiving that. So that really seems kind of random, but really kickstarted in the opposite direction that I had been going my entire life. The momentum of me trusting what my body was communicating to me. And I then was working for another arts ed nonprofit, had kind of a beautiful experience there, but a lot was highlighted about work and the way that I was taught to sacrifice my worth, even though I was always picked as like a young, shiny, smart, intuitive, intelligent. You're bringing something we've never seen it before. And also we're going to pay you for 80 hours per week, $400 every 2 weeks. And when you speak up in defense of yourself, or just literally listing facts of like numbers that don't add up, we're going to pat you on the head and put you in your place because you're a little girl. So there was a lot highlighted there to me. And there was a lot of spiritual language used there because it was mission based. And it was a beautiful experience overall. And it all of this was, and highlighted so much to me. And finally, a little bit after I left that job, I was back dog walking and babysitting, performing. My grandmother died, my dad's mom, and she was really my keeper when I was little. If I had any sort of formal training surrounding, being psychic and the gift that is, it has run through my lineage from her. It was all with her, and she was arguably like a narcissist, that archetypical mother, narcissist mother that informed my dad's pain, that informed my pain. And I was her chosen one. She saw, and it wasn't just that I was like her golden child, as all narcissists pick. It was that she saw that I called her on it in a way that no one else could. From the time I was little, that famously my dad was heard saying multiple times, "Mom, stop arguing with the 2-year-old." Because I would say things, I would stand up to her in a way that was disarming to her. And so then she saw that and really protected it the best way that she knew how. And when she died, the summer after, I came back here where I grew up in Maryland on the Eastern Shore for 6 weeks. And I had not been here. It had been 7 years. I hadn't been here for longer than like a week at Christmas, I think, in many years. I had been working nonstop, even in college. I didn't take summers for the last 3 years of my college experience. I was working and doing internships and classes. And so I needed a break. Like I arguably needed to take a gap year before I even went to college, and probably in the middle of college. And so I brought my body out of fight or flight, was not planning on staying here at all. And I reconnected with some people I had grown up with that highlighted and closed out some karmic cycles, woke me up to a number of things. And I decided to move back here. I moved into the house that I live in now with my divine masculine's ex-girlfriend, who was really good friends with his little brother. So I would spend a lot of time with the two of them, individually as a group. And then things started breaking down in those relationships. Those relationships had really highlighted his shadow to me. My shadow, but also his shadow. Like they both kind of there was a wedge there, based on his past and things he had been through and things they had all experienced together. And so I like hated him without knowing him. I was like, this guy sucks. And through my own experience of especially his ex, I was like, wait, actually, I think that was more of like a game, recognized game situation, because my experience of her ended up being volatile and manipulative and really pretty terrible, though it was illuminating. And then, I just kept working on my own healing. And I had been doing spirit sessions where I was kind of a spiritual advisor since like 2017, I think is when I started doing those. When I moved back here, it was 2019. So those the more that I had revealed to me, through the reflection of my divine masculine and the people who had been around him and were around me, that shared space, the more that was revealed to me about him, the more that was revealed to me about me, the more I was asked to heal. The more that I healed, the more people were just attracted to me for that purpose. So then I shifted because I had been doing kind of one-off sessions with people, and it wasn't enough. It feels irresponsible because of what comes up in those spaces for when I have the medicine that I do, for me to then be like, okay, bye. Yeah, good luck. Because I know how to actually help people shift. And as soon as I moved back here, I was plugged into the twin grid, which is where all of the energetic dynamics of the twin flame relationship live. It's like an astral space that we're all plugged into, and we're all kind of playing out and channeling that energy through. And yeah, one thing led to another. I really didn't want to be a twin flame person on the internet. I hated that idea because I had seen some things on the internet, and my interaction with that space was just like, this is a series of dumpster fires. This is not my experience at all. I don't like how people are talking about this. I don't like how people are using it. And so when I was feeling that urge, I was fighting it. And I had a little meeting with my guides where I was like, listen, like, I'm not your girl. I'm not doing this. And they were like, why? And I was like, because I don't like how this conversation's going. And they said, well, you're supposed to change it. So I started posting twin flame content, my work. And that started getting traction on TikTok. And now here we are. That was a very long and winding answer. It was the most concise that I had in the moment, though.
Well, so many things. Like there's so many pieces of the story that I noticed having questions about and wanting to like frame up even for listeners. And like,
yeah.
We have all kinds of different books on this podcast. It's all different kinds of healers and people have had experiences. And we talk to some extent about like divine feminine and divine masculine energies. And I think probably the way Lauryn and I talk about some of the relationships in our life would match up with people who are familiar with the concepts around twin flame. But assuming maybe the listeners don't know, can you like lay it out for us of like what that definition is, what that journey is?
Mm-hmm. I would love to. So a twin flame relationship, and this is all speaking from my experience and the work that I do. So there are other people that talk about twin flames in an entirely different way than I do. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that's not my experience. So the people that I work with and what our vibe is, two people, someone who identifies as a divine feminine, someone who identifies as a divine masculine, which just quickly, energetically speaking, we all have divine feminine energy and we all have divine masculine energy. It's how we're able to be in this world and have conscious awareness. So divine feminine energy is the left side of the body. It's that divine channel that connectivity to the divine. The divine feminine receives. The divine feminine is the creative spark. We receive that creative spark from the divine. The divine masculine is the right side of the body. The divine masculine builds, is the 3D world. We could even call the body the divine masculine, and the spirit is the divine feminine. So everyone has these two elements that interact and work together to keep us here in the world. An example I like to use often, because it's super clear. If you wake up in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m., and you're like, I have the best business idea ever. I can see the whole vision. I can see the 10-year. I can see the 10-year vision. I can see the picture of what it's going to become. I feel it. I feel it in my bones. I feel this spark, and I have this recognition, this soul recognition. I know this is something I'm meant to do. That's the divine feminine, that idea, and that belief in the idea, and that connection to the greater vision that's connected to this individual moment. The divine masculine aspect then applies for an LLC and goes and signs a lease for a brick and mortar space and writes a business plan. So we're constantly, creates the container. The divine masculine creates the container for that divine feminine to flow into the world and have a space to live. So we're constantly working with all of these elements all the time, no matter who you are, what you identify as. But within the twin flame connection, there's someone who identifies as the divine feminine, someone who identifies as the divine masculine, are really anchors for those two energies. This is one soul in two bodies. This isn't a soul that was split in half. This is a soul that started in one body on the human plane many lifetimes ago. And through mastering soul lessons, many soul lessons throughout many lifetimes, has expanded. Every time we master a soul lesson, our awareness and our consciousness expands. The amount of soul matter we are carrying in our body and projecting out into the world expands. So a twin flame soul, the one soul, is a soul that expanded beyond the capacity of one body. So it's more, instead of splitting into two bodies, it's more like an overflow, where it's just, we can't fit in one body anymore.
That articulation, but that's really helpful, actually.
Oh, great. Yeah. I find that it's also funny when people ask me, like, does everyone have a twin flame? I'm like, well, like, no, but yeah, like it's one soul. You're just in one body instead of everyone has a soul. That's what I usually say. But not everyone has their soul in another body. So we're born into two extremes. We're born into polarity. The wounded feminine, the wounded masculine in the case of this lifetime, because we are here to, through our relationship and the reflection that we find in that space, we are here to dissolve the illusion of separation, heal the coding for separation, that wounded programming. And by healing that, we are not only proving to ourselves that love is the most powerful and biggest force in the world, that we are all connected, that we are one. We end up showing that just by living our lives to everyone who encounters us. We're here to rewrite codes of toxic masculinity and toxic femininity that feed each other. Because every person, I'll say man that's at the top of any power structure that is awful, didn't have a mom that loved him. And those moms, when we look at them, got fucked up from their dads most of the time. This is something that, as we continue to pull this ball of yarn, continue to humanize people, even when they dehumanize others, we see that it's so much more collective than individual, that these individuals are expressions of collective wounding, that it's no one's fault and everyone's responsibility to fix, of course, with accountability for people who have done awful things and have proven that they are unable to safely kind of be amongst the collective. But so we are here to really highlight those codes to each other, heal them in response to that wounding being highlighted, and spread that awareness out. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And go ahead, Lauren. I have like a lot of things, but
yeah, I can tell Bethany is just like biting like her tongue at all the questions she wants to ask you. I just, for clarification for people listening, how would someone identify themselves as on the twin flame journey, in your opinion, or what do you know, if they're listening and they're like, how would I even know?
Yeah. Everyone always really is unsatisfied with my answer to this question. You just fucking know. It's not something you're a maybe on. And I will go so far to say is if you're a maybe, not, oh, I'm having a moment of doubt and insecurity and I don't know, like if you are a maybe and you genuinely don't know, that's probably not your twin flame. Or you're not at a space where you're meant to know that yet. Because for me personally, and for all of the people that I work with, it's been undeniable. And every time you try to say like, well, that's stupid and I'm not going to do it, the divine hits you over the head in your 3D physical life, not in your meditations, not in your dream space, not in the astral spiritual aspect of it. That's all still there. I mean, in your physical life, things that are so far out of either of your control, prove it. They just prove it. Circumstances that come together to show you how connected you already are and have been to this person prior to even knowing who they were or that they existed. A twin flame is not, I'm really passionate about this. The primary reason that I still am talking about twin flames on the internet is not really for people on the journey, to be honest. It's for people who might think they're on the journey and aren't, and are conflating some of the things that they've heard and interpreted, conflating twin flame truths with abusive relationships or really toxic relationships, because it's not, twin flame relationships are not toxic. They are triggering. They're never abusive. You're not receiving pain from this person. They're pointing to where you're still hurt from something else. So I'm really passionate about this. Not everyone has a twin flame. There are very few twin flames on the planet. It's not something you can make a New Year's resolution to find. In the same way that you can find a soulmate, you can call in soulmates. You can't call in a twin flame. It's something that just happens if it's part of your journey. And the collective of people that I serve and that I lead and that I'm tapped into, already well on their way, already know who this person is, already, I don't teach people how to move through their doubt when it comes to like, who is this person? And am I on this journey? Like, that's not me. And I know there are teachers out there that do that. But we're like well into the thick of the work when it comes to kind of the people that resonate with what I'm talking about. And so if you're listening, and you are, you think you have a twin flame, but you just don't feel confident enough to say that, I empower you to sit with it and remember that, like, you literally don't have to know. And when you are meant to be for sure, when you're meant to be like, yeah, I for sure know who this is, you will. And it's not something that I think it can seem very glamorous or very romantic. And it can be very romantic. There are aspects of it that are very romantic, but there are aspects of literally every relationship that are very romantic. So allow yourself the space to let that truth come to you, and don't try to force it if it doesn't feel natural and organic for where you are right now. Let that trust actually build, because trust takes time, and you deserve to actually trust your journey.
What do you
go
think
for it, Bethany. I'm like, go for it.
Okay, so like from being in a place where it's like such a huge focus of attention for a period of time, like over 20 years, period of time with the person that I think about in this way. And in a moment right now where I don't think about them that much, actually. And, feeling, I guess, like a lot of freedom, and like super clear, like all the stuff, like sort of lessons and things that you point out and frameworks and ways to think about things, eating projections and like, whatever your wounded feminine or masculine that you project over there, like those are just invitations over here. And it's like a sort of a wholeness journey. Like all that stuff super resonates and has been very helpful for me to get to a place, I think, where it's feeling really different. I guess the point is like, I totally like that you are helping people make these distinctions, and your tools and what you talk about, anyone could use in any relationship, because it's just about waking up, like using consciousness and using experience to wake up to, here's somewhere where I'm not whole because I'm projecting something out over there. And there's just an invitation back to wholeness for me to examine what that is and what my relationship is to it and welcome those things back that we see. So I guess at once there's like an internal dialogue of like, oh, am I not on that journey? But it also doesn't matter because I like a part of me is on that journey with literally every person I'm coming into contact with, because that's kind of how I'm choosing to live my life and experience my reality. So, check out Meg's stuff, even if you're unsure, maybe if you are unsure, even just to be like, because it's actually sounds like it's a lot for other folks to help make distinctions. That framing for me has been really helpful to be like, okay, any relationship that I'm in and whatever triggers are happening, there's a lesson here and there's an opportunity to grow. And sometimes I stay in things really long that are not really of service because I get kind of engrossed and like overcommitted maybe to this idea of learning and being available to feedback and staying in things that are really uncomfortable, to the point where I'll like scare Lauryn because she's like, you can really be with a lot of discomfort, almost to the point where it's scary before you're willing to change things. So I'm noticing like that. I think that those messages that like where you're making this distinction are probably really of service to anybody who's interested in healing and learning and growing, because getting more clear on when it's okay to not go towards a thing, I think is really helpful. And one of the first things that you said around basically having a near-death experience and like all of this stuff around impact on nervous system, I've been meeting tons of people in my life recently who have had near-death or death experiences, and this somehow turned on some amount of like interdimensionality, I suppose, and also was really damaging and traumatic to the nervous system and kind of started all kinds of pathways around balancing all of that. I have a little bit of that myself. I drowned when I was 2 and my mom revived me. And I have a couple of other experiences that are not quite near death. I don't remember leaving my body. I don't have like some explicit memory of that. But what is your familiarity? Like people who have died talk about what all is going on here and how it all works in a specific way. Like I see a lot of consistency. So like, how much have you like talked to other people who have had those experiences? Is it mostly about your own experience and how that has impacted you? Like there's something going on with that. So what do you have to say about it?
First, thank you for those kind words about my work. That means a lot to me. Yeah, this is interesting. I've of course encountered people where we all kind of find each other, right? Like, cause we're just have certain frequency. But I think about this in the same way that I think about past life work, where is it important, or is it fun, or is it interesting or valuable to have the specifics of who exactly you were and what your name was and where you were living and what your job was and what exactly happened? Yes, of course. At the most superficial level, it's like dope as hell to be like, yeah, it was this person. But at the end of the day, my experience of past life work is how I feel about my death is that I absorbed the frequencies that I needed to absorb and have certain things opened up for me or cleared away for me, or different channels opened that I was meant to have opened and designed a certain way in this life for what I signed up to do here in this life. And the rest kind of doesn't matter to me. Like I have a lot of insights, and I hope this doesn't sound too egoic, but it's just something I hear all the time, that like I'm able to reflect to people things that they felt but couldn't say or couldn't figure out how to see it in their mind or whatever. That's something that I heard all the time doing this work. And when I was younger, that I'm able to really clearly explain things the way things are, things that are abstract. And I think sometimes it surprises people when they'll ask me a certain question. I'm like, well, it's mystery. Because that's ultimately what I'm here to do. That's what the Divine Feminine is the keeper of the mysteries, which means that there's always going to be 1,000 more questions. There's always going to be, even if you have two people, if you ask this same exact question and I gave you this whole breakdown of what the divine is and what the purpose of life is and how it interacts and how life and death and reincarnation cycles interact and things that I have seen, if I really sat here and broke it all the way down, and then we had someone else who had a parallel experience, say something totally different, there's that third truth there that like, yeah, maybe both. Yeah. Because it's a mystery, right? Like, and we see this in science as well. No matter how much progress we make and how much mind-blowing evidence of everything that we find in every direction scientifically, every discovery leads to infinitely more questions. And working with the spiritual is the same. And I think that it gets tricky sometimes living in the age of information and in this kind of new age spiritual boom, which I really don't identify with that much. I feel a lot more ancient and earthen and kind of beyond, like, I feel like my divine connection, my connection to the divine is kind of beyond any sort of framework. And that's where the fun is trying to activate a divine masculine framework for it. I think it gets really tricky though, because we have a lot of people speaking from inner authority, which then, we're meant to, but then that can sound to some people who are really, really new to thinking about their relationship to the divine, and to the mysteries. It can sound like a verifiable point of expertise that isn't necessarily, and might be a glimpse into that person or that teacher's, and I'm speaking about myself here too, journey in what they're kind of chewing on right now. And I think that it's important not that we like police people, but as consumers of that we remain open and remain grounded in the truth that all of our connection to the divine is going to be experienced in ways that are similar and in ways that are really different from each other. And there's no like right way or wrong way to think about it, because it's not about thinking. Like it's a feelings game. Yeah, that probably didn't answer your question at all, but that's what I have for you.
Yeah, and I've just noticed like there's been several conversations even just recently, and this is just like a microcosm of like other stuff that happens all over the place. But yeah, people speaking of like, this is my experience, and they don't quite match up. And I mean, eventually we always get to some level of paradox on these shows, like on these podcasts. And so we're always being more well-practiced at holding more than one thing is true at the same time. And even the part of me that wants to know and doesn't care, I feel both accessible too, but it is very much here for me. I had my first past life regression, like through this hypnosis thing last week, and it was pretty potent.
Yeah.
That like represented a really big shift. And like randomly the night before I met someone who's like this big astral projector guy, and he was like downloading all this stuff and writing it on a receipt. And it was like I was like, okay, of course I'm meeting this person the day before this other thing. And then I think part of integrating the whole experience, I've been sort of just mapping and sussing things out and positioning my experience like appropriately, but it's also, it doesn't really matter. And that I can just experience what resonates around that.
I will say, this was what I would tell people when I was a wee babe, about that experience. This is verbatim, but I would, how like toddlers just fill silence and they have like a thing they'll say for that week that like they say every time it's quiet. This was my thing for like months. To anyone who would listen, I would say, I came down from heaven and I met mommy. And then I went back up to heaven and I sat on God's lap, and it was warm And God asked me if I wanted to stay there or go be with mommy. And I said, I wanted to go be with mommy. So I came back down to earth. And I would just say that to people. And I asked my parents when I was older, after this experience with that therapist where we were kind of digging into this space in a real way for the first time, I was like, was that weird for you all? I asked my parents, and my mom was like, honey, you were the third. We were tired. We weren't paying that much attention. So sorry, we love you. So it was very much, again, a visceral experience as opposed to something I think I saw, obviously, because it was a baby, but that I felt it, I think, in my body. It was warm. That always has stuck out to me. Like I sat on God's lap and it was warm, that it was something I was sensing and feeling, especially because it was blue. It was cold. So, and I was also, I was born a week late. I was almost 10 pounds. What the science of it was, I went septic and they never figured out why. Wow. So it was really definitely a moment of, and I've had a million moments like that throughout my life where things kind of unexplainably happen, or we can explain a little bit of it, but we don't know any further where it's coming from. And so that's kind of shaped my philosophy around needing to know certain things. And I also, in a past life, I've been a sage and I've been a nun, and in this life, and I remember it was funny kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of my soul contract, not intentionally, right? Like I wasn't like, I'm going to work with a soul contract specialist. It's just like me talking to my friend who's a Reiki master and me doing a past life regression and things just starting to come up with the priestess I was working with, where we both were like, she's very much on the same page as me in terms of how we communicate in that space. And she'd be like, okay, so like this. And I'd be like, yeah, what? And it's a lot less. I think when we say like, I'm a priestess, people think that that's this very deep, dark thing, and it can be, but it's also very chill, and can be like very casual, which is where the fun comes in for me. But I came to this life to get my hands dirty. I came here to be a human. And I think that there's a lot of, again, like in the new age space, this rhetoric around like, we're ascending from 3D Earth to 5D Earth. And I'm like, no, baby, I'm here. I'm here.
We have some stuff about that too.
Like, I'm here to get my hands dirty. And I remember saying in Catholic school when I was in like third grade, I remember getting a side eye from my teacher because we were in religion class and we were talking about nuns and how nuns go to convents and how they're kind of away from the world and they live this very pious life where they're following these rules to be very pure. And I was like, isn't that cheating? Like, isn't it cheating to hide yourself away from the world and then say that you're being pure in the world? And mind you, like I have past lives as a nun. I feel very connected to nuns. I actually know some nuns who are cool as hell. So this isn't to knock my nuns out there listening. But it's just, I think there's something so beautiful about allowing for it to be a mystery in a time where so many people are seeking answers. And I understand why. Because we're healing this division, which means that division has come up to the surface and it's really fucking scary. So we want those answers so that we feel safe in this world and in our lives and in our spiritual life. But I'm kind of feel like I've skyrocketed past that because I was put through the gauntlet of it when I was a kid. That's really prepared me to be really grounded right now. And like, yep, this is some crazy spiritual truth that I know. And here's why I know it. And also, who knows?
Yeah, I really see this in the work that I'm doing a lot of like, and I think it connects to the twin flame work also. Is like, it feels like that we're being really deeply invited as souls to fully commit to our human experience and to be fully integrated here. And also I'm really getting to know at the soul level, I call it the light body, but like what the resistance is as well. Like it's really been interesting to learn like, oh, here's all the reasons that souls traveling at light speed or faster through eternity are like resistant to coming into a body or planting on the earth, and then you add these like complexities of like something like a twin flame journey, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm meant to come in a body, be on the earth, and then intentionally experience like trigger on purpose to move through like generations of karmic buildup in service of you know, all of humanity or the future, or however you want to place that. You know, I can just see and even in myself, there's just been times that I'm like, wow, like this is what I signed up for, you know? And I mean, honestly, like this, I guess this is, it feels a little bit ego, I guess, to say this, but I do feel like I'm in the top 1% of people who are willing to go through it and like willing to keep showing up for it. And I see all these kind of soul identities that are like, I'm not doing this. It's like, I'm not into it. I'm not down. And I also get that because it is a complex invitation.
Yeah. And I think that there's something so beautiful in the duality of all of it, right? That like, it's so important, especially as a healer, as someone who's a channeler, as someone who's engaged in any sort of abstract work, astral work, to feel grounded in it, to be able to, you know, identify various ways of being, ways of working, the purpose, the mission, the momentum, where it's coming from, where it's going. And at the same time, bring in that humanist, say like, Anne, I'm right fucking here. I'm just right here like this right now with you. And that's it. Because, you know, I'll see this a lot with divine feminines I work with, where they get really in their head or feel that childhood conditioning that has pressurized perfectionism or moral purity or whatever it is, or even service. For me, it was service. And in addition to those things, that this has to be for some greater, grander reason. And it is, and it doesn't have to be. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's also just like that, integrating that, the both healing and then balancing and then integrating that, like, yes, this is just for me. And this is just for me coming into wholeness. And this is for everyone that I know and people that I've never met and people 7 generations back and 7 generations forward and people on other planets who are guiding me, all of this stuff. And then at the end of the day, where we land, hopefully, where we really achieve the greatest, we could say, result is when we're standing in the middle of those two things, grounded in the present moment, not looking for anything and not looking for any result, and not attempting to control or impact any sort of outcome, even in a positive way, right? And this is not me saying like, fuck your plans and your vision, just like be where you are, put on your sweatpants and stay where you are and never move again. But I think it's that's the dance of it, right? Is being able to recognize, as like, I often think of the high priestess tarot card sitting on the veil, right? Where over here we have the astral and over here we have the physical, and she's right in the middle and can see out over everything. That Hecate vibe of traveling amongst the earth realm, the angelic realm, and the underworld with impunity. The only deity who could do that, right? Everybody else had to be summoned or have a purpose. Even the messenger Hermes it only was on assignment and had to leave as soon as the message was delivered. So with Hecate being able to walk between worlds with impunity, that's the divine feminine. And that's why so many people on this journey, on the twin journey, get lost in their darkness earlier on, or get into a space that's like borderline spiritual new age psychosis when they're first waking up, where they're like, it's escape. And our job, our focus is really bringing everything into a state of unity within our perspective. Can I allow myself to exist in the underworld, on the earthen realm and the angelic realm all at once? Can I allow myself to experience the deepest pain of this ego death, or the deepest pain of acknowledging where this limiting pattern came from, acknowledging that grief or that the impact of that trauma, while maintaining and feeding and cultivating and allowing myself to receive really this higher perspective around the fact that it isn't just a shot in the dark, and it isn't just you being pushed down to be pushed down, that it is part of this greater plan. It is part of feeding this higher perspective that can help you shift yourself so that your impact on the world is loving, and moving the world more toward love, moment by moment. And then that final piece, while both of those things are happening simultaneously, once you get into a place of embodiment, on the journey toward like a full expression in the body, we dip in and out. That's how this works, these cycles, which is perfect and beautiful. That's how it's meant to be. Because we can't, we'll shock our system if we're doing this all at once as we wake up on the twin journey. But what'd you say?
On a nervous system, it's like pendulations. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so coming into that middle space, right? Can we allow this and this to be true, this death and this eternity to be true while I'm just here with you?
It's like it's literally the paradox of life. Like all things, like we are an individual soul traveling through time. We are also like everything, everywhere, all at once. We are, just, that's what I think really interests me about your work and this idea of like, I guess for me, there's this ultimate union that's being called forward, right? But there's this really complex journey of and union in a whole different way of meaning it. But I'm curious, like, what have you learned, or what ways have you been expanded? I know this is a big question, so just pick a couple by your own divine masculine. Like, how has that expanded who you are?
A big one is money. I used to villainize money. I used to think money was the root of all evil. Money is a non-specific neutral.
Energy.
It is a non-specific neutral. And when, of course, there are people who are hoarding wealth in ways that are harmful to literally all of us, including themselves. They operate from the greatest point of scarcity, even greater points of scarcity than people who have nothing, because they have all of it and they're scared that someone's going to take it.
I talk to and hang out with a lot of those people. A lot of the people that I coach.
But he really, my family, my dad pretty much took a vow of poverty. He has a master's degree, and there were definitely moments where with him and my mom both, being really educated and having good jobs, where we were scraping. We didn't know if money was going to keep coming in a way where we could maintain just a very simple life with 3 kids. And I was very privileged growing up and had access to education. And, we were never poor. This is a distinction that my father makes as a macro economist and a monetary economist. We were never poor. We were broke because we had access to resources. We were never going to be without. It would be an ego hit of like going to try and ask someone who would trust us if we could have money, right? But and we had help from different relatives and older family members, so I was never poor or impoverished. And again, had a lot of privilege, but the attitude around money and the trust of money was not there. And my divine masculine was the total opposite growing up. That's a major thing where like my relationship to money, which isn't just about money, it's about my trust in my own self-worth, that I deserve to have my basic needs met. And I even deserve to have more than that if I feel worthy of it. Right. That's a big thing. Can
we go a little bit into that? So like,
sure.
What does it look like when you're learning with your divine masculine? Because I know you've talked a lot about like, sometimes you're physically, because I don't think we've said this on the podcast, like a lot of times you're not even physically with that person or, in relationship with that person in the 3D. Like, what did that look like to learn with your divine masculine?
So I learned his shadow first. And he and I are very potent examples of twin flame dynamics, so that I can teach it, because that's part of what I signed up for. So we've experienced very potent versions of the dynamic so that I go, okay, and then can see it really clearly and teach it. He has a pretty shadowy shadow. And part of the twin flame dynamic is that the divine masculine will never hurt or abuse. It hurts a little bit different because your feelings get hurt by people all the time, right? But like they'll never be abusive to the divine feminine ever. And part of that protection, it is a protective mechanism. It's also just the physicality of it. And this is why you end up separating when you have physically separating, when you have density that you're still carrying in your body, that unhealed trauma, the limiting patterns, it's denser energy. And so when you are embodying your soul essence, that's that higher energy, that lighter energy. And that is the magnet that pulls you two together. If you still have points of density, a certain amount of density within you, you get repelled apart, like the wrong end of magnets. So you come together, have those things highlighted to you, and you repel so that you can heal them. And as you heal them, you're anchoring more soul matter in your body. You get pulled closer together again, and then you'll have it highlighted again, and you'll be pushed apart, but not as far apart. And that process continues. So when I was learning his shadow, I didn't know him. I had not met him. I heard all of these things about him. I was around someone who literally every single time we had a conversation over the course of the 9 months that she and I knew each other, brought him up and it's not hyperbole. It was every single time, so that I had a very clear, visceral understanding of his shadow. And again, of course, I was really judgmental of him this whole time because I had never met him. He was just these stories and this figure that was being built up by her, these stories from her. And I did do energy work on his brother once. We had a little session, and I could feel, and when you're like channeling with someone, you feel them, you feel the shape of them, their soul essence, and their pain and their wounds. And I could feel him in that space because of the wounding that his brother had. It was counter, they came out of the same place. So there was like a shadow of him in there as well. And, as things broke down there and I started to have clarity about what was being highlighted to me through this situation about myself and started to heal various aspects of things, I just started being more and more exposed to him. Like random people would tell me things about him, and I'd find out that people that I've known my whole life have known him as long as he's lived here. And I'd never heard of him until I came back here that summer. I had never ever heard his name even, which is weird because we're both big fish in a pretty small pond. So as I was
meet them in real life or be aware, or
what'd you say?
Do people always, if you're on the twin flame journey, do you know who that person is in real life, or do some people not even know who that person is?
There are some people that say that they feel that they have this divine masculine. They don't know who it is. That's not my journey or the people that I work with. And to be totally honest, and I'm just one person. This is just I don't know how that would work because of what the mission is. Mm-hmm. If you don't know who they are in the 3D, because the divine masculine is the 3D. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that would work, but I am not the divine, so it could, I have no idea, but that always feels a little bit like it doesn't feel off or wrong to me when I hear about it. It feels like a hypothetical. And for me, this journey is very physical. So that's where my resistance to be like, yeah, for sure comes from, because I just don't understand in the context of my own journey and these universal truths that have come through that have connected me to all of these other divine feminines who are on this journey as well. I just don't know how it would plug in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's totally invalid or that it's untrue or that it's not happening. Right. Mm-hmm. For me and for the people I work with, yes, it would be very difficult for me to, not impossible, but it would be, I think, limiting for me as a teacher and a guide to try and guide someone through that. So as I was being exposed to his shadow, this is where a lot of that reflection came in, to answer your question. Again, another long and winding road, where these moments where I was being exposed to his shadow and told of his shadow and feeling the impact of it in people, right? Actually feeling his shadow without having to really receive it from him directly. I always 100% of the time was holding space for whatever pain he caused, like for whatever person had an unpleasant experience of him. And no matter how much I was doing that, at the same time, I was just shown so clearly where in him it came from. The wounded inner child and the past life stuff. Like it was not something I could really strategize toward. It just was just things I received. And that always then sent me into my own shadow work process, where I was seeing exactly what in me was attached to those wounds that I was feeling the impact of on his part out in the world in our shared community. So it really is a process of receiving. Yes, you can journal. Yes, you can, of course, meditate. Yes, you can ask different questions from your guides, or you can ask yourself and try to explore and discover. It's really a process of surrendering to discomfort and allowing that discomfort to move through you in a way where you're not intellectualizing it, but you trust yourself when different illuminations come up. That can only come up when we allow ourselves to fully sink into the reality and the weight and the fullness of discomfort when it's triggered by witnessing this other person's discomfort or the results or the impact of their discomfort. Does that make sense?
It doesn't just make sense. It's like a lived experience. Like it's pretty profound. Like, I guess when I think about my own experience with this is like the level though of empathy and awareness relationally across the board that I have now as a result of this journey. And when I was, I'm in a space of this repelling experience right now. It's still, obviously there's still work on, I get like resentful. I get annoyed. I'm like, okay, I need to, I'm in that space right now. So I just want to presence that. But it's like, I feel like I have space for like every kind of relationship. And like, I can support so many people in any kind of relationship because of the things that it was like called me to look at and face in myself. And I think what was interesting is when my, what I believe is my divine masculine showed up, I had finally done enough work to realize I'm the common denominator, right? So like I had done a 12-step program and just certain things where I had, relational dynamics, but I'm like, oh, I'm the common denominator. So even though there was all these like things happening, I kept asking myself, well, I attracted this, or this is a reflection of me, or how is this? How am I co-creating this? And then the aftermath, the gift of that it's what I'm trying to say is this kind of deep humility and awareness and ability to hold space and also take a lot of feedback from people, honestly, because I'm like, I've done such deep work and had to face things that I didn't want to face that now it's like, you really can't, I don't know, in general, I'm not having to face a lot outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to highlight something here because language is so much a part of my work. Reframing things to come into that space of truth. And this idea of my wounds attracted this is something that I love to shift. I love to shift that language where it's not that you were living in this wounded space and that then attracted and meant you deserved people to treat you poorly. Mm-hmm. We are surrounded by every kind of person all the time. We have the opportunity to connect with people who are going to be healthy for us, people who will be terrible for us all the time. In every space you walk into, all kinds of those people on every end of that spectrum exist. It's what we identify with. What do I identify with as someone who would be like me or be good for me or be, would represent love to me, right? Because a lot of these patterns start when we're really little and we see people in our lives who are meant to teach us love, who are teaching us that love is something it's not always. And so that's something that I feel called to speak into this space because it's really important to recognize that, like, while we need to get out of a state of victimization where everything is everyone else's responsibility and we are just perpetually the victim, which is totally a step on the divine feminine journey where, like, that's part of the wounded feminine identity is that I am the victim here. And oftentimes that'll perpetuate these moments of wounded feminine manipulation, where we're like manipulating in the name of being a victim. And so we can, or whatever. And yes, it's so important to empower the self up out of that identity. But we also don't want to like shame ourselves for literally doing the best we could with what we had, the best we could with what we were taught. And the other part of this journey that has been so unbelievable to me until it's believable, right? And so wildly beautiful is that my worst moments, my worst moment, not when something terrible happened, when I was being the worst I've ever been, I needed those. And this is not me like endorsing people being shitty or saying like, be shitty, it's for your journey. But like all of my moments, when I look back from this point, moments that still bring me into a space where I'm processing shame and releasing shame or releasing guilt, or allowing that to teach me. They've all been formative moments where now I am able to empathize with people who are not easy to empathize with.
Right.
And I'm able to break, and I'm able to break that cycle, because at the end of the day, and this is a huge pillar of divine feminine truth on the twin flame journey, one of the things we're here to do is forgive the unforgivable, which means that we're breaking a cycle of dehumanization. And that doesn't mean that, again, people aren't held accountable or people aren't brought to justice when that is called for and when it's necessary. But it does mean that fear and division and the things that are fed by dehumanizing someone, that's just an energetic pool. It does not care if you're being a dick or if you're being morally sound by dehumanizing someone who's done awful things. That pool of energy is just a pool of energy. So if you're standing over here or over here, it doesn't matter what side of that spectrum you are on in terms of how you live your life. If you, in the privacy of your own mind and your own heart, are feeding this idea that someone is not human, dehumanizing them or thinking they deserve to be punished like a monster because they have been acting that way, even though they're a human. That's still just feeding into that pool, building that momentum of fear, building that momentum of division, of separation. So that's one of the biggest tasks that we have, right? That can be really confronting. And we all have to throw temper tantrums at the divine because it gets really fucking annoying where you're like, really? Like I have to sit here and like the buck has to stop with me on this one. Right. I don't get to be petty, or I don't get to like say the perfectly crafted mean thing that just came into my mind to this person. Like I have to actually deconstruct what they've handed to me and only give it back out to anyone, even myself, when it's more loving. It's really confronting, but that's the beauty of it. And that starts with that accountability piece, right? Where we're like, okay, where have I been genuinely giving my power away by allowing other people to be the problem, or allowing other people's problems to be something that are stronger than my own identity, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like that the divine flame journey, it's like this really intense projection. Like instead of like a lot of projections are here, it's like I have to see it really, really close. And I just felt like it was like all the conditioning, all the programming, so my own, but generational, it's like all of it gets like put in a place where I can see it and then actually deal with it. But I'm curious what you think about, like, I always feel tension and constriction around this like polarity that's created around narcissists and codependence, and the way that this is my personal opinion, like demonize this dynamic, right? And how it relates to what you're saying around this like forgiveness paradigm and being, this polarities that we create. And I'll just leave it there, but just in general, what comes up for you around that?
So when I'm talking about forgiving the unforgivable and monsters, I'm not talking about my divine masculine or the divine masculine. Right. There are definitely moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to forgive the unforgivable because like he was a little bit of an asshole, or I'm learning that he was a little bit of an asshole. And also learning where in his past that came from. And I'm forgiving that person, like whoever inflicted that pain, or forgiving the institution of it all. This is something I think it's really important for the internet at large to integrate more. Narcissism is a diagnosable mental disorder. Every single human person on the planet, because we are animals who are scared of death and evolutionarily have programs in us to keep us focused on ourselves so that we don't die. Like, that's where that comes from. Ultimately, every single human person on the planet has exhibited narcissistic tendencies and does in certain seasons of life or in certain moments. That's just how we all are. We all have an ego. We all need an ego. It's why we're still alive as a species. It's where a lot of the beauty of our species has come out of people being like, no, I have to focus on me and this, and ignore maybe other people's needs for periods of time because of that. This is not me endorsing narcissism. This is me saying that I think that a lot of people label things narcissism when it's like me saying, like, it's like the conversation around bipolar where people are like, oh my gosh, I was like so energized yesterday. I'm really tired today. Like, I'm so bipolar. Like, I was mad earlier. Now I'm happy. I'm bipolar. It's like, it's not what that is. Right. I think that, both twins in my experience have had moments where they've exhibited toxic behavior. But it's not been a lifetime. It's not the rule. It's periods of time where they're embodying that toxicity, or when I embodied it, when he embodied it, when everyone I've talked to on this journey has embodied that shadow self. The difference between, what that looks like and what a narcissist is that it's not an all the time identity. It's like a moment of extreme circumstances leading to the nervous system freaking the fuck out and saying whatever you need to say, or what have you, those moments where you're allowing the shadow or allowing the ego to lead. But again, this isn't like a consistent identity in the twin space. And after you meet each other, especially, you will not be in that space for any length of time if you're feeling shadowy. And something that I think is important to say, I've known narcissists. I was in a relationship with one, like diagnosable. A lot of my clients have had that experience as well. It feels different. I know what a relationship with a narcissist feels like, where everything's confusing and nothing is the right answer and everything's weaponized and used against you. That doesn't happen in these relationships. It doesn't. And if, the person that you're thinking of as your divine masculine on the twin flame journey in this way, where you're eternally connected to them and you can't really walk away from it, is weaponizing your love against you intentionally and pointedly and repeatedly over and over and over again, that's not it. This is not how this works. And again, I want to be very careful about how I'm speaking about this, but we do embody these toxic states, the wounded feminine, the wounded masculine, because we're here to transmute them. So we have to embody them for a period.
That's my whole thing. And wouldn't you say that codependency shows up a lot in the wounded feminine?
Absolutely. And it's all from the abandonment wound, right? I would rather that we attach codependency to our own wounding as opposed to someone outside of us that trained us in a relationship when we were an adult to be codependent. If you're a codependent person as an adult, baby, that started when you were 3 years old, most likely. And it's trained from learning that you were built to be abandoned. When I say the abandonment wound, a lot of people jump to a very extreme version of that, which is the most dramatic Lifetime original movie where you were, your one parent died and your other parent dropped you off at the fire station, and then the people who adopted you dropped you off at the fire station again, and nobody wanted you. And it's this very dramatic, sad story. And yes, of course, some people experience things that are that extreme, and of course have an abandonment wound. If you ever were a child and you were crying and your grown-up looked at you and said, "Be quiet right now," that's abandonment. That is training you to abandon your experience and abandon yourself within your experience. So I would much rather we start collectively shifting into a helpful space instead of this space where we're villainizing people and victimizing ourselves, where we say, I'm codependent, or I have had codependent tendencies because of my abandonment wound, as opposed to because of a narcissist. And of course, people need to get
or
there.
That I am a codependent, like, or that my identity is a codependent, versus like, I have shown up as a codependent. I have shown up.
Yeah. Well, even
narcissistic behaviors.
Yeah. Even making it a noun, a codependent. It's like, no, it's it's an energy that's moved through you. It's a programming that you've held for a period of time, but that's not an identity. Right. And, I think that a lot of people, especially when we're talking about these behaviors that have roots in really deep wounding, really old spaces, sometimes even past life spaces. If it's the first time you're acknowledging that, people need to be a victim for a little bit. And that's okay. Like, I respect it. There are people who, the things that you're mastering in this lifetime, in their soul contract, they're not going to master it till they're 90 or until another 3 lifetimes from now. So I have really worked to come into a space where I respect people's limits. Even if my first instinct is to critique it and be like, well, like, whatever. The more that I really just focus, this is the part where people who are really triggered by what we're talking about will call me a narcissist. I really just focus on myself and kind of where I am. And part of that is acknowledging that I have the freedom to be exactly where I am and feel what I'm feeling and look at things the way I look at things. And inherently tied to that freedom is everyone else's freedom to do the same, even if it clashes with how I view things or how I would do things were I in their position, because I'm not. So it can be a little bit frustrating doing the work that I do when there is that projection from people that aren't actually looking at the work that I do. They just see the word twin flame. They're like, that's just narcissists and codependents or empaths. And I'm like, well, first of all, thanks for being here. Thanks for the comment. Thanks for the engagement. Second of all, I'm going to ignore you because it's really it's not the same,
Bethany, do you have any questions?
I have something about I do nervous system work. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner. It's been a huge part of my healing experience, and that what you're talking about, holding more and having it being on the edges of discomfort and being able to pendulate and then hold more again, and that expansion. And I know Lauren's gone through periods of sobriety around sex and love, and I know you're sober, and talking about your body and moving it and that being a big part of some kind of shift in energy. I'm just curious, how much do you think about nervous systems? We have sort of this, something you were saying earlier, we've had this idea, okay, there's this old idea of enlightenment, which is more I'm just going to go somewhere else and not be here. And even let my body decompose practically because I'm so somewhere else than here. And Lauryn and I have a thing with that where we're I think it's about how to get here all the way. And that it's about being pure consciousness in a body. And what's that like? And I just have a lot of ideas around the nervous system and how it plays into all that. But you guys also have these elements of movement and sobriety and things like that. So just any thoughts you have around nervous system support? Is that a part of it? Is, how does that, I kind of think of it as some kind of link.
Yeah.
So
it really is. One of my big things that I've been teaching lately and highlighting lately, and labeling very clearly lately for clients is that resistance within yourself is divine. It's divine timing. And it is that stage gate that keeps us from totally overwhelming our nervous systems. If we go entirely into the pain, all of it, all of the density that we're carrying and all of the density we have the capacity to tap into as super open, intuitive channels, we'll die. Like it's too much. And so there's a lot of work that I do with clients around letting yourself be in resistance. And in fact, surrendering to resistance is often the first step in moving through resistance, because we're not adding to it by trying to push it away from us.
And that's a nervous system prompt. That is, can we be with what's here? And
yeah.
Not
and so I do a lot of giving permission for taking breaks from this work, really. And not like, oh, I'm going to clock out and I'm going to escape.
Yeah.
But like, oh, I don't actually, if I've been meditating and journaling about this thing, and it's been like, I spent a whole evening doing it. And then, before I'm going to bed, I'm setting intentions for my dreams to reveal things to me. And then I wake up exhausted. I'm like, yeah, I think you need to like watch 3 episodes of your favorite show and get your favorite takeout and not be the purest, cleanest, holiest little spiritual girly in the world, and let yourself be a human person. Because in our humanity, when we let ourselves surrender to the nervous system, to what our body is telling us we need, no matter through what language we're speaking, whether it's super physically, right? Like, oh, my stomach is rumbling. I'm hungry. What am I hungry for? That's usually the question where we learn more, right? That can point to different things that are impacting our nervous system. So like, if you're like very tapped in and feeling pretty calm in your nervous system, you would be like, oh, I need a protein. So what proteins do I have around? If you're super on the fritz, you would be like, I need like very specifically to smell the cookies my grandma is making when I'm 11 and to eat one of those. Mm-hmm. And so that can kind of reveal to us, again, just listening can reveal to us where we are and how to proceed. And I am all about like genuinely the path of least resistance, because when you awaken to the twin flame journey, to the divine feminine journey, and when you've done that groundwork to get yourself up out of the momentum of limiting patterns and the momentum of your nervous system being fried, when you like turn that wheel and that ship is now traveling in a different direction, you're building that momentum, it's really important to pace yourself. It's really important to let your body lead. And it's not always going to make sense to the mind, but if you need to sleep for 3 days, you need to sleep for 3 days. So I kind of intentionally stay away from intellectualizing aspects of what I do too much, because so much of what I do is faith healing and helping people heal their faith in the mystery, in the unknown. So I, of course, have studied the nervous system, both in myself, in work I've done with therapists and psychologists, and then also like reading books and taking trainings and all this sort of thing. But when it comes to the science of it, I intentionally keep that at the back of my mind when I'm talking about these things or teaching about these things, because for me personally, when I've been in spaces where I'm like studying it really hard, that is me, usually has resulted in me just forcing and confusing myself more and clouding that conversation with my body more, because I'm like trying to figure out the system of it, as opposed to just saying like, well, wait, like, what is it feeling? And what do I need based on what my body is telling me? So I'm really grateful that there are practitioners out there like you who are doing that work more concisely, because it is not it's a part of what I do, but it's not my bag fully, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And it's like, it like all of these things are different and they're not. Like it's literally just holding space for someone to be in their experience. Like that's there's not a lot of science and like specific things, but that's kind of the deal, is like whatever's happening is okay. Yep.
How can we make you feel safe feeling what you're feeling right now?
Reflecting that it's okay for it to, even if it's like an exaggeration, like even if it's something we would label dissociation, it's like adaptive, so friendly. Yeah, it makes sense that you'd want to break. Like it's even that, it's okay, whatever is happening. Yeah.
Oh, I also want to say there's one image that popped into my mind, Lauren, and I just want to speak it here because it was nice. When you were talking about the projective nature or the intensity of those perceived projections in the twin space, instead of seeing the twins as facing each other and projecting onto each other, what I often see is holding hands, standing in front of a giant screen and looking at all of those projections from the both of you on that screen together. And deconstruct. That's what it feels like to me when you're really like consciously tapped into the system of energy and how it works is, oh, I'm seeing this from you and where it comes from. And I'm seeing where it's attached, where it's literally connected to the thing in me that's being projected. Because it's really, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people get disarmed by when they meet their divine masculine or divine feminine. It's why the divine feminine feels so safe. And it's why the divine masculine often feels unsafe and needs time. You can't project onto each other after a lifetime of being used to projecting onto everyone. You can't project. They go, I see where that's coming from. You can just see it automatically where in your wounded identity that's coming from. And it's disarming. But there's actually kind of an inability to actually project onto each other in a way that takes any root in either of your mind about the other. But there is that projective aspect, of course, that you're then kind of deciphering. But I like that image that came up of like, oh, it's like turning out and seeing it all laid out in front of us both together.
Well, I noticed I have one more question, and I know we're tight on time, or like we're closing. Are you available for another question and then a closing? Yeah. What about you, Bethany?
Yeah, my 3:30 canceled actually. So
okay. I just wondered if you have the experience, Meg, of your divine masculine consciously partnering with you on this journey, or is it just like an understanding that, I don't know if I'm asking that in the way that I am trying to communicate, but even the example you just gave of like you speak about it from this place of like, it feels like you're both taking a lot of responsibility for your learning and for your whatever. And I wonder if that's how you experience it, or if sometimes it just feels like both of you doing life and doing your own version of life. And it just so happens that it helps complete these like lessons.
So I actually first heard the term twin flame through his ex quoting him. That was literally my introduction to that term. Mm-hmm. He's very spiritual and has been for a long time, which was an issue for some people when then he was being an idiot in his shadow, being like, these two things do not match. Who you are before the sun goes down and who you are on Friday night do not match. So definitely since I've known him, and even the year prior to that, just based on things that were happening in his life, he is fully conscious and aware of his shadow and his ego recovery and his journey. And now he knows, obviously I'm doing this work on the internet at a level where a decent amount of people are looking at me, and people in our tiny, tiny town know who I am and have put different pieces together. And something I'm really grateful for about him is that he's really straightforward and he's not scared of really, he's scared in certain ways of certain things, but he's a really genius businessman. And so like having a tough conversation or sitting someone down and being like, this is what I want from you, or you need to stop doing whatever, is not a challenge for him in the way it would be for a lot of people. And he hasn't looked me in the eye and been like, Meg, we're doing this together right now. And I'm tapped in and you're tapped in and we're doing it. But there's been so much suggestion of that. And I also know him. And I know that if he wanted me to stop, he would tell me to stop speaking the way that I speak about our journey. He would tell me to, and he has not. And there's also just, and I said this to him the first day we ever met in person, like words are primitive. Like for he and I to speak about certain things is literally antithetical for us to like label or ask each other certain things is antithetical to the space where that question would even be coming from, because it's this space where we just both are all the time. And I think it's really important also to recognize, like, I know it's really easy to get caught up in 3D circumstances, and we have to hold equal space for the 3D circumstances as we do for the astral experience and the soul-based experience. But this person is my soul. And I don't mean like, oh, he's the other half of me. I mean, like, when I feel into myself, he's there. So I know that experience is the same for him. The further you get into the embodiment aspect, as the divine feminine, because the divine feminine experience starts with like a lot of questions and a compulsive need to have them answered and verified quickly. The further you get on that journey, the more you see that all of those answers are already just here. And just by nature, because of the past life experiences I've had, and because of the awareness of our soul that I have and our soul's journey, we're already together in that. And this is going to sound kooky, but like, we came here to this planet at the same time together, in such a time and place where we would meet and know each other and be connected in all of these ways by all of these people. And I don't mean that I'm walking around my house like acting like he's right here when he's not. But there's like an element of that bigger picture anytime I'm asked a question of that, where I'm like, yeah, but like, we're here together and we're doing it. So like, it doesn't, where it's just kind of a fact to me. And the other thing is that this is a collective journey. And he and I are both really powerful people. We always have been. The impact that we have on rooms that we walk into is big, always. And when we're in our shadow, it's big in a certain way. And when we're in a space where we're feeling balanced and integrated, it's in a whole other way. And we already, as we've been coming closer and closer and closer and closer together physically, as our lives have started to be dismantled and rebuilt in ways that actually can hold each other in ways that they couldn't before. A big part of his role is kind of making sure that everyone who is integral to both of our journeys, that may have limits that he and I don't have anymore, isn't going to be left behind or feel left behind or feel damaged even by he and I being in a space where we're together consistently. Because yes, it's physical, and yes, it's this 3D thing. And yes, it has to do with social dynamics and family dynamics and generational patterns and all the stuff that's rooted in earth. It's also, when we're physically together, like an unexplainable eternal thing that's really can be really triggering to people who aren't necessarily in a space to just receive what comes out of witnessing that. So there definitely is an awareness on both of our parts. And there's also the awareness of the reality of it all too, the 3D reality of it all, both realities, that spiritual, energetic, soul-based thing that we are both very tapped into and consciously doing in tandem with one another. And then also that there has to be points of separation so that we actually are walking the walk of what I've been teaching, what I've been talking about when we are together, not just, in these moments where we're not physically together. I hope that was clear.
Yeah, it does. I really relate to the experience of like, they're right here with you. Like, I really understand that. I was just curious, like how conscious it is. And that was really helpful. And, our podcast is called The Healing Collective, and we identify this like paradox of we're both need healing and already healed and whole. Right. And the paradox that you mentioned in the beginning of like, just being is enough and there's work to do. So just wondering, as we close, like, we usually just ask guests, like, what would you want people to know about Healing the Collective, like from your space?
It's all perfect. It's all purposeful. And remain open to the mystery. It's not a race. There's no test. No one's keeping score. No one's grading you. No one's going to tell you whether you passed or not. When you can allow yourself to really release that desire to have a checklist that you can like make sure you're doing all of the things. That's when that's when you're giving the divine permission to move in your life. And that's really the biggest thing, is step aside, just by allowing yourself to be human, be fallible, be disgusting and broken and sad and terrible and all of these things, and still be held by divine energy, by the divine, by love, to still offer love to yourself or offer stillness to yourself, letting yourself be enough, no matter what point you're at, that you can sit down and just be in the space you're in. That's when, when we take our hands off the wheel of trying to fix ourselves or someone else or a collective issue, that's when those answers come. And that's when then we find that clarity and we know, oh, that's my next point of action. That's actually how I can help myself or that person or this collective issue. When we allow the responsibility of the answer to be someone else's, to be the divine moving through us, as opposed to us solving something or us finding something. So really, that's the biggest thing I would hope people could take from me is cultivating that relationship, and that the divine is real and is so complex we can't wrap our minds around it, but is not complicated to receive.
Yeah,
another paradox for you.
Yeah, but it's really, really beautiful. I think that's a great way to like close it. And I feel that essence in you, and like even what you represent online, like that essence comes through. And
thank you.
I noticed, just wanting to appreciate you for honoring like your path and your individual work. Like, I project that it is pretty difficult to be as honest as you are about the topic that you are. And I just see, like, before you came into the MySpace, the conversations around twin flame were so weird and so like, and I wasn't even like tracking that in my own life. It was just like, I don't know. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. We don't need to get into it, but it was just like, then I was having these experiences, and then I found, your work, and I was like, yes, like this resonates. Like this actually feels like a truth compared to these other kind of more superficial ways that I had heard about the work. So I just want to thank you for bringing that forward, and for the courage that I imagine that takes sometimes.
Thank you for saying that. I received that. It was at first really challenging, where I was like, I don't want to do this, please. But now it really is, after getting through a few big moments where it felt like I was revealing a piece of myself in a way that was pushing me past my edge, and seeing the goodness and the purpose of those moments, like the goodness that came out of them for me and other people, and the reasons why I've been asked to do that. I'm in a space now where it's not as difficult. It's a lot more. I've kind of flipped that switch where if I have a truth I'm meant to share and I'm not sharing it, that's when I start to feel a little like uncomfortable. That resting mode.
Thanks for listening. We welcome your feedback. You can email us at healingcollectivepod@gmail.com. Our website is thehealingcollectivepodcast.com, @healingpodcast on Twitter, @healingcollectivepodcast on Instagram. Special thanks to Ethan Luck, who produces. You can find him @EthanLuck on all platforms.